Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining. Uh, Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us for a very special web event. I'd now like to pass the floor to our presenter today, Sean Blanton, a product marketing manager with Mojo Networks. Today, Sean will be walking you through challenging the conventional wisdom of security in your WLAN.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, watching now and watching in the future. As Erica mentioned, my name is Sean Blanton. I am the product marketing manager here at Mojo Networks. I'm very excited to talk to you guys today. I am a security nerd through and through. Before my time at Mojo, I spent 3 years at a firm selling vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. I had a chance to achieve my Security Plus and CEH certification. So I love diving deep into ethical hacking, understanding the real consequences of security, especially when security is looked at incorrectly or is applied incorrectly. And that's really going to be the topic of our conversation today. I'm going to make the assertion that Wi-Fi security today is all wrong. So we're going to challenge conventional wisdom slightly. We're going to take a look at what exactly Wi-Fi security is all about. And in doing so, we're not just going to take a look at what Mojo does. We will get there, but we're going to start by highlighting the really nasty effects of a really simple tool. It's called a Pineapple, a Pineapple Wi-Fi device, and we're going to really see what it can do and how it bucks against the conventional wisdom of Wi-Fi security. We'll spend a lot of time today talking about wireless threats, making sure that we have a really good feeling for what they are, as well as understanding a strong defense strategy. And then, of course, finishing off with showing you just how Mojo Networks can help you apply that defense strategy and really be successful in protecting your network and your clients. And so we want to start with the assertion that Wi-Fi security is all wrong. So what do I mean by that exactly? I don't mean to suggest that we're running around completely off track. But what I want to do is help you understand that Wi-Fi security, at least as far as conventional wisdom is concerned, it looks at the challenge as a network-focused strategy. And that feels right? I mean, Wi-Fi is, after all, a networking protocol. It connects clients to the network. So when we look at Wi-Fi security, we think, well, I need to treat it like I treat my network. And what happens is we start to look at how do I apply security strategies to my network? Well, generally speaking, when you look at intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, when we're looking at even things as simple as client end antivirus and things like that, it's a signature approach. So we use signatures and approximations, in this case, to determine the vicinity of access points. What's happening is the focus is on finding the rogue AP. Again, not suggesting that that is not important, but what I want to help you see is that finding the rogue AP, although important and really fundamental to the overall security strategy of Wi-Fi, it is not the singular priority. It is not the only thing that we need to be doing. And in many cases, especially because a lot of major compliance frameworks look at rogue access points as the core element to addressing the Wi-Fi security element, it becomes our singular priority. And it's just not the case. What we really need to understand is that in reality, wireless attacks affect clients. Those attacks are specifically designed to attack clients in order to steal data from them. And so Wi-Fi security requires a client-focused strategy. And that means, first and foremost, understanding that when we think about Wi-Fi security and the attacks that are coming through, it's not the rogue AP that's the attack. The attack is the pushing and the pulling of client devices. And that's because people are the greatest vulnerability. And any security conversation you're a part of, you will hear this phrase. It's true. People are the greatest vulnerability. APs on other networks, they don't have the same security controls to prevent access to malicious sites and files. Sometimes they don't even have the same security controls to prevent access to simply connecting to the network. And you don't have control over that. And your people, well, they do. They have significant individual control over Wi-Fi connections. in part because Wi-Fi grew up as a consumer technology. Everybody, no matter how much techno fear they may have, everybody understands Wi-Fi. They know how to connect to it. They know some simple things to do to get functional. They also know that they can hop from network to network if there's an issue getting access to the sites or the applications that they want on their current network. And this can be taken advantage of very easily and, unfortunately, very effectively. So let's look at a Wi-Fi Pineapple. What I'm going to be showing you is my Pineapple Mark V. It is a ethical hacker's access point. It's designed to demonstrate many of the wireless attacks that are prevalent. It can be used for consulting services. It can be used for demonstrations. And today, I have mine running so that I can show you some of the things that this Pineapple can do. Now, in full disclosure, I want to let you guys know, and of course, everybody who's watching out there, I am not actively running attacks. So by no stretch, any device that happens to be connected to my Pineapple at present moment is not being attacked. It doesn't even have internet access. I'm not allowing it to go any further than the access point. This is purely for demonstration purposes. Okay, so what are we looking at here on the screen? We're looking at the web interface of my Pineapple Mark V. Now, the Pineapple is really cool because not only is it a dual radio access point, but it has both access point and client capabilities. So it has the opportunity to not just produce a network, but it also can connect to other networks. It can tether off of cellular devices. It has slots for a SIM card. It has a lot of different options and flexibility to provide a connection from the wireless network it produces to the wired internet behind it. In particular, the access point is really determined to have clients connect to it. Because if you're on my network, from there, I can start to attack you. And one of the most effective ways that the Wi-Fi Pineapple will have clients connected to it is through an attack called Karma. So what is Karma? Well, Karma is, if you think about Karma, you have to take a couple steps back and understand the motivations behind wireless attacks. You know, back in the early 2000s, wireless starts to really gain popularity, and the first set of attacks were very opportunistic. This is where free Wi-Fi became the norm when you would go to airports, when you would go to public spaces. And probably most of us on the call today learned at a very young age, don't connect to free Wi-Fi. If you don't know who you're connecting to, avoid it. And that's why I would say this is opportunistic. It did capture a lot of early adopters, and once it became understood that open networks in the wild that you aren't aware of are not good for connecting, it became less effective. And so the next iteration of that attack was to, rather than just broadcasting one singular network and hoping to grab a couple of flies nearby, let's broadcast a series of networks. And let's think to ourselves, okay, what are the most likely networks out there? So I mentioned airports. Airports, started to put Wi-Fi out in a very early stage. So in many cases, I might walk around as a criminal trying to steal data from clients and start broadcasting 8 distinct networks, all open networks, free networks, but common ones that look familiar. The goal is to either entice someone to connect for the first time who may not realize that they're connecting to my Pineapple rather than connecting to the legitimate access point nearby. The other idea is that clients, when they connect to networks, they store those settings in their Wi-Fi profile. And what happens is clients are probing constantly with their Wi-Fi signal to ask to connect to certain networks. It's why when you go home at night, you're automatically connected to your Wi-Fi before you even take your phone out of your pocket. And so we take advantage of that. We say, well, if you've already connected to LAX Wi-Fi, then if you come near me and I'm broadcasting LAX Wi-Fi, your phone thinks that my access point is the same network it was connected to before. And if it happens to be probing for that network at that time, I have a connection. Again, opportunistic. We're not really getting the full breadth of connections, but we're getting closer to Karma, because Karma had the idea that rather than broadcasting a distinct number of networks that I have to manage, that I have to guess at, why don't I inform my broadcasting list with what other clients are probing for? So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at what we see here. There are 3 devices currently connected to my Wi-Fi Pineapple. One happens to be connected to just the open network that I broadcast. That's my super opportunistic network. It's an open network, and someone has latched on. But let's take a look here. Now, you don't know this, but I do not live near the airport. And there are no Southwest airplanes within Wi-Fi range of my office right now. But somebody is connected to Southwest Wi-Fi. It's because my access point has constantly been listening for the past about 45 minutes that I've set this up. And it's taking record of networks that are being asked for by clients in my vicinity. So these are networks that are in my house. For example, my private network, GBA Corp, has been listed here. We have some of my neighbors' networks. We have some hotspot networks. We have Southwest. I happened to come back from the Bay Area last night. I had my iPad on the airplane with me. And so when I turned my iPad on this morning, it called out for Southwest Wi-Fi. And my Pineapple, being on, heard that call. And it said, I'm Southwest. Just like it's saying I'm Netgear and I'm a TT and GBA guest. If we take a look at my network list, what we're seeing here are these networks, some of which are traditionally protected. For example, this being my home router network, is being broadcast open. That's because my laptop is seeing the network coming from my Pineapple, not from the router. It doesn't know the difference. And quite frankly, you may not know the difference. But I see the network there. I try to connect to it. And instead of connecting to the router, I connect to the Pineapple. And that is the essence of karma. It can effectively be any network it wants to be, so long as it's being fed information from clients nearby. And should a client opportunistically call out, not just with a null probe, not just with a scan probe to see if networks are available, but to actively ask the question, Southwest Wi-Fi, are you out there? My Pineapple has the opportunity to respond yes, and to accept that connection. And as far as you're concerned, you're browsing the internet on Southwest Wi-Fi. You might not even realize that you've connected in the first place. But you're on my network, and now I can get to work. So this is pretty bad. And this can run ad nauseum. This list can push out to about 100 different networks. You'll notice that one other client that's connected to my Pineapple is connected to an HP print network. So one of my neighbors has an HP printer. It's broadcasting a network. And so my Pineapple is taking advantage of that. Anything that would try to connect to that to print a document or to run a setup, to hop onto my Pineapple as well. Now, karma has arguably become less effective than it was, let's say, 3-4 years ago. Part of this is because smartphones in particular, they're more apt to send null probes and discovery probes when asking for networks, rather than just blindly accepting connections. So while karma is really effective at probing for wireless networks and for allowing for that connection, before it used to have, I could go to a presentation and have 20, 30 connected, and these are devices in their pockets connecting to these devices. Karma is still really effective, but we may find ourselves in a situation where we don't want to just snag somebody randomly. We do want to actively encourage someone to connect to me. And that's where Evil Portal comes into play. Because Evil Portal allows me to put up a splash page in front of my network. And if I'm just broadcasting the name, let's say, for example, of a TWC hotspot, I can snag the information of that splash page. It's really, really easy. I go to the portal, I connect to the network. The splash page pops up. I can grab that page source information and I can copy all of that HTML and I can throw it into here. And what's happening is that now when I go out into the wild, let's say I go sit down in a busy downtown area, my Pineapple in my pocket, hanging off of a nice strong battery, tethering off of my 4G connection. and I'm broadcasting TWC Wi-Fi, and someone connects. They're presented with this screen. And what I can do now is I can actually put under username and password this sign-in icon. You may be able to see at the bottom left-hand corner of my browser. It's not just signing them onto the network. It's actively placing the information being placed here in the username and password field into my database. That's my authentication target. And what happens is I can do lots of really cool things here. Now, I could just connect them to the network, grab those credentials. Those credentials are mine. I can now sign online with those credentials, change a password. I could throw out a ransom message. I could start rerouting service to other places. I could also start to use different splash pages and different ways of getting this information to gather other pertinent pieces, email addresses. Maybe I want to grab personal identifiable information. So I throw up a register now. I want to link somebody to another page with a first name, last name, address. I want to start to really dive deep and start gathering information from clients out there. The end user, completely unaware of what's going on. And once again, they've connected, and if they've signed in or they've registered, I'm going to create a really simple way for them to press go, get on the network. Most people out there won't even blink twice. They'll browse, they'll have a good connection, and they'll continue on their way. But in this case, I haven't just had them connect to my network, but I've actively grabbed pertinent information, usable information, valuable information from them. And so now that the end user is on my network, whether they came in through my splash page, whether I just snagged them through my karma attack, now what can I do? Well, now I can start wringing my hands because at my fingertips, I have the tools needed to get just about anything I want. You'll see here that I have tools like DNS spoofing. So with DNS spoofing, really simply, I can target certain URLs, and I can force the end user, once they hit those URLs, to run to a different website. Now, this could be pushing them to a site so that they download malware. This could also be pushing them to a site that is just full of ads that I have set up as a criminal, with the intent of gaining ad revenue from the sites visited by the users on my network. So don't immediately think that a hacker is, or criminal hacker, is dead set on introducing malware or even grabbing credentials. In many cases, this type of activity is designed as a money-making scheme, and it can be really easy to get you to go to my site if you're on my network and I'm spoofing your DNS requests. But if I do want to start grabbing information, I have SSL Strip capabilities where I can start to pull apart requests to HTTPS sites. I start to spoof using, again, my DNS spoof and my SSL Strip, your Wells Fargo page or your Bank of America page. And for all intents and purposes, it looks legit and it looks secure, but I'm spoofing the certificates and I'm making it look like you're on the legitimate site, entering your information, and then redirecting you to the real page. You just think you put your password in correctly, but I actually grabbed it from you. And URL snarfing as well is a really great way for me to do reconnaissance, to get more information about browsing habits so that I can target my attacks. And then when all else fails, I have the Meterpreter. I have the Metasploit framework built into my Pineapple, or I simply have it running off of my laptop tethered to my Pineapple, and I can start to run active exploits after I've run a map scan. I know services that are running. I know what browser you're running through, and I start to exploit with the intent on gaining access to your machine. And then from there, it's implementing malware. It's throwing in recorders. The sky's the limit. So I hope I haven't scared you away just yet because we're going to talk today now about what threats are we really looking for and how do we account them. So let's take a look at some of these top Wi-Fi threats. We have 4 that we're really going to focus on. Now, the first one is the rogue access point. Again, I know that I am talking about Wi-Fi security in a client-focused strategy, but I did also say rogue access point detection is a paramount. It's a foundational component to our entire strategy. And it's because, and so first, let's define it. What is a rogue access point? Well, it is an access point that is plugged into your network that you did not install yourself. that is not sanctioned by the IT organization. The reason why these are so dangerous is because rogue access points are often non-malicious in nature. Rogue access points come from your employees. They happen to be in an area where Wi-Fi is poor or Wi-Fi is non-existent, and they have plugged in their own AP to give them access. They may even feel that because their access point has a default password, that they're okay. It's secure. I have a password. What do I have to worry about? Well, the problem is that these types of networks can go completely unnoticed by wire detection methods. It's just another entry point into the network. And if the user is leveraging these access points in default modes, number one, many common consumer-grade access points are known to be exploitable. And there is little mind paid to fixing those exploits because it's, number one, more expensive than not to fix them. And number two, there's no way of distributing those patches to the millions and millions of devices that have been shipped so far. The other thing that's something to be considerate of is that default passwords can be prone to library attacks. If I, as a criminal, have the opportunity to sniff the air to see the way that clients are connecting to the device, I might be able to run those ciphers against my library attack. And maybe it takes hours or days or weeks, but I may be able to snag that access point, come back, connect to the network, and now I'm on my way. So rogue access points, very, very dangerous. It's essential that we find them. Now, honeypots and evil twins are so exceptionally dangerous. And there's a slight differentiation between the two. So first, we define a honeypot as an open, enticing, and apparently safe network. A honeypot goes back to the idea of broadcasting a network perhaps near a school that looks and feels like the school's guest network. Perhaps that school doesn't even have one. So when you connect to it and when you see it, it looks legitimate. And so I connect to it willingly. And that's different than an evil twin, because an evil twin actively mimics an existing SSID. And this can happen in two places. It can either happen in proximity of the mimicked SSID or very distant from that legitimate network, with the intent on being that if I'm nearby, let's say, for example, I'm in the parking lot of a large retailer, I may broadcast the guest network out in the parking lot with the intent on snagging devices as they enter the mall or enter the store. And especially for those people who may be outside, spending time maybe in their car before or after they've left, jumping onto the Wi-Fi or already on the Wi-Fi, I may be able to grab it because for all the client knows, I'm still that same network. Now, being distant from the legitimate network may make it easier for me to grab those opportunistic snags, especially when that client device is actively probing for that network because it recently visited that store. The reason why these are so dangerous is because, as we talked about earlier, they take advantage of the greatest vulnerability there is, people. It could be completely identical in look and feel and usability, and they're aimed at attack clients and to get sensitive data or to get PII from. Now we look at our trusted clients. Now, our trusted clients are Wi-Fi threats. We have to look at them in this way because trusted clients, and as a point of definition, they're your corporate issued devices. They may also be from home devices, but the intent of these devices are to be used by employees to connect to, with the intent of connecting to your corporate network. But the threat is that these trusted clients are connecting to neighboring networks, which are often open. Open networks, very, very easy to sniff traffic that's passing through. But what's even more is that what the real danger is that it's putting sensitive data at risk. Think about corporate issued devices. Think about the data that they store on them. Not even just within their email clients, their documents and presentations, but anything they might have downloaded from internal systems, as well as the access to those systems, is present on those end devices. And if they are not connecting to neighboring networks, who's to say they're not connecting to an opportunistic pineapple? They bypass your security controls, potentially granting access to malicious sites or files that you would normally block through all of your wired security defenses. And trusted clients, in some cases, they act as a wireless bridge. And this is also dangerous because this is now opening up your network to anyone who may want to gain access through the wireless network being created by your trusted client. And then finally, we look at clients that are BYOD. And these are the untrusted personal devices that are unfortunately making their way onto your network. They're typically powered by unassuming individuals, but the problem is that they can easily hop from network to network, even without you noticing, because they cannot tell what AP you're connected to based on what your screen shows. These devices can unintentionally bridge devices. They're creating 3G, 4G hotspots, which trusted devices connect to either opportunistically or intentionally. So they're creating multiple ways to get onto the network and to bypass the network. So a lot to consider when we're looking at Wi-Fi threats. At this point, I'd like to poll the audience. We always like to ask a question to the audience. So we're going to see that question pop up soon. The question really is this: how confident are you that your organization's wireless clients are consistently connecting to the enterprise Wi-Fi network? Are you super confident? Do you have the tools in place to see all connections, to be alerted when those connections are misplaced? Are you pretty sure? You're pretty sure. Maybe you trust your enterprise. Maybe you don't feel like there are a lot of opportunities for them to connect outside of the enterprise network. Maybe you're not sure at all. Maybe you feel like, I really don't have any way of knowing this. If you don't even have Wi-Fi, that could present its own issue because there could be tremendous numbers of Wi-Fi connections happening completely unaware due to the lack of scanning in that spectrum. We talked about pineapples earlier today, and it reminds me of a story. You may have heard this before. I really like this story, but a customer of ours in the UK had an issue with a pineapple device. It was an academy. It was a grade school, a high school in particular. And during a test phase of installing Mojo Networks, as they were running scans and as they were putting out the wireless network as well as their security scanning, they started to see evidence of an evil twin. And it was pretty troubling to them because it was not something that they were expecting. They were expecting to see student devices connecting to 3G, 4G hotspots. They were not expecting to see what looked to be an active attack. And lo and behold, with the help of Mojo Networks, the devices, they were able to find the room in which this device lived. They were able to find the device itself. And it was, in fact, a pineapple device. It was taped to the back of a chalkboard. It had a 3G, 4G hotspot running off of it. And through investigation, it was found that a particular student had installed this device with the express intent of having other students connect to it so that it could grab, in his mind, he wanted to grab credit card information by putting up slides, or rather putting up screens that would allow for students to input information. And this was incredibly surprising to them. They really did not have a feel for students who were actively doing this. And then another short anecdote, just this morning, as I'm getting prepared for delivering this particular webinar, I'm looking at my Pineapple, I'm looking at the devices connect to it, and I see someone connect to Oakland Wi-Fi. And I think to myself, oh, that's interesting. And I immediately think, oh man, my wife in the other room, getting ready for work, turns her laptop on, and what do you know, she's connected to Oakland Wi-Fi. So it just goes to show, and she flew weeks ago to the Bay Area. So it just goes to show just how effective this particular system could be for grabbing those connections, simply because her laptop had prioritized Oakland Wi-Fi, then it connected to the network. All right, so let's talk about a proper defense strategy. What are the 3 steps that we really need to pay attention to? How do we make sure that everything we've talked about so far can be avoided, or in many cases can be actively prevented? The first thing, and arguably the most important thing, is to develop a method for accurate AP classification. Knowing where an access point resides is the single most important piece to your Wi-Fi security strategy. And I can't stress that enough. Because if you don't know where an access point resides, and what I mean by that is, does it reside on your wired network or does it reside elsewhere? Just that dichotomy of on your network or off your network is essential, because without that, without confidence in that process, you're going to see alerts skyrocket. You're going to see false positives indicating we think we see this. We believe this to be a threat, or we believe this access point to be on your network, but we're not sure. Those false positives can be really damaging to a security strategy because they create excess work. They get tiring. And what happens is you turn it off, and that's bad. The other issue is that legitimate threats go unseen, false negatives. And this is even more dangerous. They're much fewer in volume, but when a legitimate threat goes unseen because it doesn't feel like a threat based off of its intrinsic properties. For example, this Pineapple device being broadcast with a very, very low power rate would seemingly feel through other techniques like a very distant access point and may not be considered a threat. So these legitimate threats go unseen, false negatives, and that's when you get hurt. And as I mentioned, manual intervention confirms the validity of these, and with too much manual intervention, you turn the system off because it's just not worth it, and you feel distressed by the amount of information you're getting. Second step is surgical preventative techniques. So once we have a strategy in place where we can actively and accurately detect access points and classify them, we have to look at prevention. And prevention is both wired and wireless. So wired and wireless prevention techniques ensure an effective quarantine status in lots of different scenarios. We can't just rely on one or the other because threats are coming from all angles. These preventive techniques directly target offending devices. They disrupt intermediary devices like port blocking, because what's happening is other techniques for blocking. If you're just relying on wire techniques, for example, and you may be using port blocking, block this port, disallow for this access point to pass traffic, it may actually have negative effects on the network. So we can't just rely on that as our primary preventative method. It's too widespread and it's too prone to causing issue. The other issue is that if you're not focusing on individual connections and you have the opportunity of either missing connections that you need to block, or if you're spraying too hard, if you have too much going on, that you may find yourself actually facing fines, facing legal response, because blocking connections that are not yours is against the law. It is an FCC violation in the United States. There are similar requirements worldwide. So it is essential that our preventive techniques are surgical. They're going for exactly what they need to touch. What happens is when you do this, when you take this approach, especially over wireless, when you're looking at blocking connections in the air, what you're enabling is the ability to push clients off of offending networks and herding them back onto authorized ones. If one of your corporate issue devices is connecting to an external network and you don't like that, then we can actively disconnect that network individually without affecting the external network and have that client fall back on the enterprise network. Again, that is dependent upon knowing accurately where access points reside. So fundamentally, we have to look at a behavioral approach. Blocking connections of specific AP client relationships that are deemed inappropriate or insecure. We're paying attention to the connections. We are not relying on signatures. Signatures are rarely up to date. They are prone to false positives, and quite frankly, they can be spoofed. Criminals know this, and so they get around it. There are just too many devices on the network to keep track of. So a signature-based approach is just inherently flawed. If you can rely on understanding behaviors and blocking those relationships that are not appropriate, then we can be very, very effective in actively preventing them and doing so in real time. So how does Mojo do this? What are we bringing to wireless security to really impact and to allow ourselves to be very client-focused? I mentioned it all rests on the ability to accurately classify access points. So first, let's take a look at a competitor's approach. A standard approach is out there in the wild. They primarily rely on wire-to-wireless MAC address correlation. There are other techniques, polling switches and getting information, although those are even less effective. Wireless MAC address correlation simply says that my sensor, my scanning access point on the network, is going to see a MAC address on the wire, MAC address A. It's going to see MAC address B in the air. That's part of the SSID or any of the SSIDs being broadcast. And what you'll notice is that the MAC address is typically one digit off. The last one or two digits of the MAC address will be off by one, maybe 1 to 2, maybe A to B. So if they're close enough, we can correlate those MAC addresses. It gives us a sense of understanding that SSID in the air is tethered to this device I see on the wire, and I flag it as rogue. Well, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that most consumer-grade access points don't have MAC addresses that are different by a couple of bytes. Apple is a perfect example of this. Their MAC addresses associated to their SSIDs are completely random relative to the MAC addresses of the wired Ethernet port on that particular access point. This technique will miss most rogue devices. In some cases, there is no correlation to be had. There's a single MAC address, or the BSSID doesn't have a virtual MAC address. They don't always need them. It's only relevant to access points that can support multiple SSIDs. And of course, my Pineapple, completely undetected. I have really easy ways of bypassing this so that no matter what you do, you will never know that my device is on your network. And it goes through similar ways of spoofing MAC addresses to make myself either look like a legitimate client or to completely separate the SSID and the hardware MAC from a correlation perspective. So how do we do it? Well, AirTech is our security system. It's our WIPS platform. We use what are known as marker packets. Marker packets work like this. My sensor is sitting on the wire, and it's injecting packets onto the wire. It's creating background traffic in the form of layer 2 ARP broadcast packets. We put a special little message in the headers. We encrypt those messages to make sure that they are unique, they are ours. And that marker packet flows through the network. It touches every endpoint, including access points. And access points are really, really good at bridging traffic, taking those broadcast packets from the wire and pushing them into the air. When my sensor scanning the airwaves sees that packet, it recognizes the packet it created on the wire, that it knows without a shadow of a doubt that the SSID that broadcasts that packet is tethered to the same wire network it lives on. That's how I know that the access point that I'm seeing is in fact tethered to the network. And it's also how I know that the many, many other SSIDs I see out there are not tethered to my network. That provides me, that behavioral technique provides me with accurate AP classification, and it sets the stage for active prevention, both over the wire and on the wire and wireless, so that I can effectively protect my clients from wireless attacks. So if I can leave you with 3 key points from this particular presentation, the number one is that Wi-Fi security strategy should be considered a client-focused strategy. We need to be thinking about not what it means to protect our network from wireless threats, but what does it take to protect our clients from wireless threats? We need to recognize, like we do, that people are the biggest vulnerability and they don't realize it. It's not just about making sure that they're not visiting sites that are inappropriate, that they're downloading files that are inappropriate, but we need to help them understand that they cannot connect to networks that they don't understand. And we need to put systems in place that will prevent them from doing so, because it can be very, very difficult to reverse that type of behavior. And finally, we need to use a behavioral approach to identify access point location. Not relying on signatures, but instead using behavior is paramount to a successful WIPS implementation. Without that accuracy that comes from knowing that packets are passing based off of the natural behavior of access points, and instead relying on what we think we see. With that, I can implement WIP's wireless intrusion prevention that works automatically, that happens in real time, and that alerts me when an issue arises, not when we think we see something. Your signal noise ratio is reduced, and your security strategy has an effective implementation. All right, so thank you so much for being part of this presentation. I'd like to just take a few minutes to introduce those of you who are not familiar with Mojo Networks, so you guys have an understanding of who we are, what we bring to the market, how we want to help you. It really starts by understanding that Mojo Networks supports a fully integrated cloud-managed platform. That fully integrated means that whether I'm looking at Wi-Fi in the context of access, connecting my clients, producing multiple types of networks, troubleshooting, and making sure that I'm optimizing the networks. If I'm talked about today, or how I might create guest networks that are engaging, allow for two-way communication, allow for data sharing and interaction. Mojo Networks supports a platform that gives you a complete workflow for all three of these major tracks. And we do so in a way that makes it easy to flip on new services, flip on new features, and create a very cohesive Mojo environment. If we take a look real quick here, we see that Mojo Launchpad gives me access to various apps and services that are available in them. Our primary services, Wireless Manager and Guest Manager, they support my major workflows. Wireless Manager being the interface through which I can create my networks. I can manage Navigator. We use a hierarchical approach to Wi-Fi management. It makes for a automated experience when developing policies and distributing them. Plus, it makes it so easy for me to dive into very specific, to dissect issues either through customizable dashboards, through strong analytics around active networks. You can see right now at this are 34 active networks surrounding my office. And through that marker packet technique, to determine immediately, two of them are not to be concerned with at this point. Two of them live on my network. And this one is not something I introduced. And so as a result, I want to make sure that I am not just, but I am actively working to prevent anyone from accessing it over their wire. It's an opportunity for me to not only create really engaging and deep guest networks. We have our port configuration capabilities where through a series of authentication plugins, I can ask my users to connect with me over social media, to use web forms, to target very specific information that may require system, like special programs or email newsletters. I can also mass guest book that would allow for me to use phone numbers to pass, or even to create temporary username and password, to secure my guest network in a more corporate thing. Supports our campaigns, which allows us to create beautiful splash pages with our web designer. And using Canvas, we can create interactive splash pages without any web design skills required. And not only that, but Guest Manager provides me with rich analytics that can provide me with some really pertinent information about who is nearby. So what times of the day am I seeing large numbers of clients around my environment, and how long are they spending there? There's a lot of application when it comes to physically engaging from a maybe practical or an operational perspective. We can start to predict when those times will come so that we can prepare ourselves and we can be better in tune with the challenges that we face supporting wireless. And then finally, Mojo Packets is a graphical packet analyzer. It is the industry's only GPA, cloud hosted, and allowing me to take packet captures and visualize them to significantly reduce the time and the energy required for Wi-Fi troubleshooting. With Mojo Packet, I have an opportunity to dissect issues quickly, to use an interactive screen that allows me to see packets in a whole new way, to overlay data like frame type and data rate, to view it from the frame perspective or even the time perspective. And of course, because we're working in the cloud, I have really easy ways of collaborating, sharing my traces with anybody. It doesn't matter if they have access to the Mojo Cloud or not. They have the opportunity to look at and to comment on this particular thread, making your job easier and making yourself more effective in troubleshooting and diagnosing issues. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope this was informative, and I hope it helped. We got some really interesting information from the polls, and we do want to answer some of your questions that may have come in. But just to share some of the results, we found that while 30% of you said that you are super confident in your ability to see whether or not your clients are actively connecting only to the enterprise network, that's really great. You guys must be Mojo customers. We do see that 30% felt that they were not sure if their clients were actively or always consistently connecting to the network. 10% of which said they have absolutely no way of knowing. And 30% of you said, I don't even have Wi-Fi. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about what Mojo Networks can do, not just from a security perspective, but also perhaps for developing and deploying your own Wi-Fi network, please contact us, and we'll be happy to take you through a more personalized demo. You can see information. You can call us at 877-930-6394, or simply send an email to myrep@mojonetworks.com. You can also check out our website for lots of really great information and other ways of connecting.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. So I just wanted to open it up for some Q&A here as we have a few minutes remaining in the hour. I see at least one or two questions have already come in throughout the session, but for all those who were waiting, now would be the time. In addition, if you have any questions that come up after this event or you want to know anything else, you can feel free to contact us at any of the numbers or emails you see here on the screen. myrep@mojonetworks.com. Feel free to shoot us a question anytime. And I also wanted to just review again how to receive your free access points. We have some qualification requirements. So for all those who have already received free access points from Mojo or Airtight, or you're a valued reseller, partner, or distributor, you're not eligible to receive an additional free access point. But for all those who did join us for this live webinar today, we will be contacting you to confirm your shipping details. So all we need to know is just where to ship this access point, and we'll communicate with you and send it on the way. And I have a couple questions here. So one question came in during the middle of the presentation, and it was around whether or not all access points have an IP that is not similar to the access point from the extra communications. If I'm understanding that correctly, I might have to ask the attendee to divulge a little bit more on that question.
Well, if they're referring to the IP address, that of course is going to be dependent upon the network on which that IP resides. If you're referring to the MAC address, the answer is yes. MAC addresses are a unique identifier for a device, and every device has that unique identifier. So that is fundamentally how we track devices, as you saw in the screen earlier. All of our access points, even our wireless clients that we see, we're going to track and we're going to keep record of it. And the MAC address is really our focal data point. And it's because it is a unique identifier.
Okay, great. And if that attendee has any additional questions, again, please feel free to submit them now. Again, everyone, don't be shy. Another question: how do you perform wireless prevention exactly?
So wireless prevention is accomplished through essentially a man in the middle. So what happens is a client attempts to connect to an access point, and using our classification capabilities, we might recognize that client as a authorized client, and then we might see that the access point in question is an external access point. Could be a hotspot, could be a neighboring device, could be Starbucks next door. It doesn't matter. It's off the network, and we've deemed that relationship inappropriate. So what my sensor does, my Mojo device, is that it steps in between that connection. It mimics the access point and sends a deauthentication request to the client. And similarly, it pretends to be the client and it sends a deauthentication request to the access point. The access point and the client respond in turn. They are looking to complete the deauthentication exchange, and the Mojo device responds to complete the transaction on both ends. As far as that client has willingly disconnected, this connection has been successful, and it goes on its merry way. The client connected to the access point is the client believes that the access point has terminated the connection, and it attempts to reconnect either to that AP or, more likely, especially in the context of an authorized client, it's going to look to the next available where its queue, which would be your enterprise network. Once it sees that network, it will attempt to connect, and of course, your Mojo access point will say, "Come on board. You are classified correctly. You should be connected to me," and it will continue on that network. Should it attempt to connect to the external network a second time, or third, or maybe 100th time, it will always follow the same path. It will be disconnected, and it will fall back on the authorized network.
Great. Thank you, Sean. I haven't seen any additional questions coming in. You must have done a bang-up job. But again, I know a lot of times people have questions following, if you'd like to follow up with some additional information. If you'd like, you can also visit our website, www.mojonetworks.com. We have product documentation as well, and some really great one-pagers to help walk you through some of these features and security enhancements Mojo offers. Let me see if any other questions come through here. No, it doesn't look like it for today. So we appreciate everyone taking the time out of their very busy schedule to join us. And we look forward to seeing you on any future webinars. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, everybody.